The Honorable John T. Baker, presiding judge. Chief Judge, presiding.
Please be seated. First of all, please let me welcome you all to this wonderful ceremony to celebrate the service of Patrick D. Sullivan to the Indiana Court of Appeals. All of you are honored guests and very important to our court and to Judge Sullivan. We're here to express our gratitude to Judge Sullivan, to celebrate his attributes as a judge and as a public servant and as a man, and to remember our times together. We're not saying goodbye, because Judge Sullivan is going to occupy a different position with our court than he has in the past, and we will continue to enjoy his fellowship, his leadership, his scholarship, and his sense of humor. There are an awful lot of people to celebrate 43 2/3 years of judicial service. That is a long time. I tease my colleague that he is one of the few people in central Indiana that knows how to speak Algonquin so that he can communicate with the Native Americans that were occupying the land here. At this time, I would like to introduce the members of our court, in addition to our honoree. Joining me today on the front bench from your left to my right, to right, there is the former Chief Judge and presiding judge of the 5th District, Judge John T. Sharpnack of Columbus, Judge Patricia Riley, presiding judge of the 4th District, Terry A. Crone, presiding judge of the 3rd District of South Bend. As Judge Sullivan is the presiding judge of the 2nd District, I've asked Judge James S. Kirsch of Indianapolis to occupy his seat because he's going to be making some statements. Also joining us, and I'm going to ask my colleagues so that everybody can get a good look at you and the camera will take your picture, that you stand and acknowledge the crowd. My friend from Bloomington, Judge Edward W. Najum Jr. From Carmel, Judge Ezra H. Friedlander. From Indianapolis, Judge Carr L. Darden. And Judge L. Mark Bailey of Greensburg. Judge Melissa S. May of Evansville. Judge Margaret G. Robb of West Lafayette. Judge Nancy H. Vadic of Valparaiso, Judge Paul D. Mathias of Fort Wayne, and Judge Michael P. Barnes of South Bend. We're also joined by the judge of the tax court, Judge Tom Fisher. I'm going to call upon my friend, the Chief Justice, to introduce the members of his court in a few moments, but I also want to introduce to you our senior judge, George Hoffman, Senior Judge Bill Gerard, former Judge Linda Cheesam of our court and the Lawrence Circuit and County Court. Linda. I believe we have Judge Eugene Shipman, formerly of our court in the Marshall Superior Court, and he's joined with his wife, Ida. Joining us also is my wife, Peggy Baker, Jan Dixon, wife of Justice Brent Dixon, our court administrator, Steve Lancaster, and the former Justice of the Supreme Court, Myra A. Selby. Please greet these wonderful judges. In addition to a number of outstanding, wonderful people, I want to specifically recognize, and I'll call on some of them again to make a statement, a comment, or a presentation. Representing the executive branch today, we have Mr. Earl Goode, the Governor's Chief of Staff. We have the Attorney General, Steve Carter, the Solicitor General, Thomas Fisher, former Assistant United States Attorney General, Debbie Daniels, and I believe she's here, a lady who's occupied so many positions and is always willing to answer the call to any service, Marge O'Loughlin. Marge? Oh, wow. Utility Regulatory Commissioner Larry Landis. From the legislative branch, we are graced today by our senior senator, Richard Lugar. Also joining us are State Senator Richard Bray, State Representative Larry Buell, former Speaker of the House of Representatives Paul Manweiler, former State Representative and Chairman of the State Republican Party Rex Early. From our extended judicial family, our federal cousins, we have from the Southern Indiana District Court, and who has been recently nominated to serve on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, John D. Tender. We have Magistrate Judges John Paul Godich and Bisu Shields, who is formerly of this court with her husband Bill, and Jane Magnus Stinson. Bankruptcy Judge Anthony J. Metz III. Representing the trial bench from the state, the President of the Indiana Judges Association and Allen Circuit Court Judge Tom Feltz. Vice President and Judge of the Floyd Circuit Court Terrence Cody, and Secretary-Treasurer and Judge of the Marion Superior Court, Robin Moberly. We are also joined today by Superior Court, Marion County Judges Patricia Gifford and Cale Bradford, who will join our ranks on August 1st. Hamilton Circuit Court Judge Judy Prophet and her husband John. And we have former Marion Superior Court Judge John Jack Barney and his wife Nancy, and former Marion Superior Court Judge Dave Jester and his wife Diana. We also have joining us today the Clerk of the Supreme and Appellate Courts of Indiana, Kevin Smith, and his deputy, Heather Smith, the Executive Director of the State Board of Law Examiners, Mary Place Godsey, Lilia Judson, the State Court Administrator, and Deputy Administrator, David Remondini, Meg Babcock, Counsel of the Judicial Nominating Committee and Judicial Qualifications Commission, Julia Orzeski, Executive Director of the Continuing Legal Education, and Tom Von Kameke, Executive Director of ICLEF. From the bar, we are joined today by the State Bar's President, Richard Eynon, and its President-elect, Doug Church, Executive Director, Tom Pierce, the Indianapolis Bar President, Kevin McGough, President of the Marion County Bar Association, Jamie McMillan, and Executive Director of the Indianapolis Bar Association, Julie Armstrong. Former President of the Bar Association's S.R. Chick Bourne. President-elect of the Indiana Trial Lawyers Association, Fred Crow, and Legal Director of the Indiana Civil Liberties Union, Ken Falk. From academia, we are joined today by the new Dean of the Indiana University School of Law in Indianapolis, Gary Roberts. We have the Dean from the Santa Clara University School of Law, Donald Poland, the former Dean and Chancellor of IUPUI and Interim President of Indiana University, our friend Jerry Bebko. Former Dean and Professor, William F. Harvey and his wife Jerry. Former Professor and Executive Director of the Indiana Judicial Center, William Andy Kerr. Please extend a Hoosier welcome to all of these wonderful folks. It's my privilege at this time to call upon the Chief Justice to introduce members of his court and to make a few remarks. It should be mentioned at this time that with the change of Judge Sullivan leaving our court on a regular basis and Judge Bradford joining us in a few weeks, Chief Justice Shepard will have superintended the replacement process of all of the judges on the Indiana Court of Appeals. In his 20 years of service as the Chief Justice of Indiana, he has presided over the Judicial Nominating Commission, whose responsibility it is to try to find the best and the brightest to occupy these positions. And all of us on the court think he's done a wonderful job. Inasmuch as a safeguard was provided for in our constitutional amendment of November 1970, that is, that the voters could reject the selections that his commission and the governor should make over the years. None of their selections have been rejected. So it is at least my position that they've done a heck of a good job. It is also a pleasure to introduce the Chief Justice because of his prominence in so many positions in American jurisprudence. Most of you know that he's occupied the leadership position of the Chief Justices of the United States, and he's chaired the National Center for State Courts. But he has been a great ambassador for Indiana, Indiana lawyers, and Hoosiers in general. It's my great privilege to introduce my friend, our Chief Justice, Randall T. Shepard.
Thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate your sentiment. We have a full house here this afternoon to say grace over Judge Sullivan. The judiciary is nothing if not a place of tradition, and so I introduce my colleagues in the order in which they have served in this room. Justice Brent Dixon, formerly of Hobart. He taught me it was Hobart rather than Hobart, which I, having grown up in southern Indiana, was misunderstood. Justice Frank Sullivan, Jr. of South Bend, Justice Ted Boehm of this city, and Justice Robert Rucker, Jr. of Gary. Judge Sullivan, you might have known in watching the flow of paper here over the last few weeks that that much like yourself, working upstairs to kind of clear the deck, finish up the inventory and the like, we too have been trying to dispose of all those instances in which people have taken some question about decisions authored by you by petition of transfer. And we've been working hard to get that deck cleared, to disabuse all of them of the notion that there might be need of further attention in any cases in which you participated. And I want you to know that the case of Goodman versus State, the last apple on the tree, still in play, does not reflect anything about whether it will be granted or not granted. And with any luck, you'll be affirmed one more time. And I want you to leave thinking otherwise. There'll be much talk today about duration of service. Some of this has already been mentioned in a good-natured way. There is a way to quantify that. Pat Sullivan has served here as an appellate judge on the Indiana Court of Appeals longer than any other person in the entire history of our state. In many respects, time is an unusual, almost a capricious thing. We experience life in unusual ways, moments when it seems to float along, and other days when that are fully packed with events and pressing matters. And when you look back on them, you're not quite sure whether it all lasted an age or just a moment. This, in many respects, is one of the things, this stability is among the things that the judiciary contributes to the American experience. It is a place where traditions and values of the oldest sort are repeated, reinforced, explained, reinterpreted. It's easy to see that when you're a trial judge. The trial judge goes into the courtroom and says to a defendant there for arraignment, "You are entitled to trial by jury. Mr. Defendant, you have the right not to be a witness against yourself. You have the right to a lawyer." These are rights, of course, that all Americans know, partly because fourth grade civics teaches them to us, and partly because we all watch Law and Order. Few defendants know, but all judges know, that when they speak these words, they come from the pen of James Madison, and that they are part and parcel of the cloth of American life. Appellate judges do not add to the experience of our fellow citizens in that direct a way. We do not see litigants very often face to face. We do not have the chance to hear them or talk to them orally in settings like this place or the courtroom upstairs. But appellate judges are nevertheless a part of sustaining those values for the better future life of the country. And all of us are tremendously grateful that you have been that kind of voice these many decades. Thank you so much for what you've done for all of us.
Thank you, sir. It is my privilege at this time to call upon Mr. Earl A. Goode, the Chief of Staff for the Governor of the State of Indiana, Mitch Daniels. Mr. Goode.
That's how much he does respect what you've done first. So it's my pleasure to present this to you today on his behalf.
Thank you, sir. I'll now call upon the President of the Indiana State Bar Association, Mr. Richard Eynon from Columbus. Mr. Eynon, would you come forward and address the court? Sorry we put you in jail back there. Something.
Good afternoon. That's Justice Sullivan. Judge Sullivan, nice to see you. Court of Appeals judges, Supreme Court justices, all the dignitaries, Senator Lugar. Very nice to be here with such an esteemed group. I'm Richard Eynon, and I'm currently privileged to be the president of the Indiana State Bar Association. Judge Sullivan, you have given most of your professional life to redress the grievances of the citizens of the state of Indiana. I want to thank you from all of the attorneys that have been directly and indirectly affected by your good work on the Court of Appeals. Unfortunately, all of our judges seem to become isolated when they become judges. A judge in the Court of Appeals has even less contact with attorneys on a day-by-day basis, so that I suspect you seldom have been commended for your decisions and the work that you've put into our profession. I am here today to collectively thank you for all of those years and all of those opinions and all of those hours of hard work of which we attorneys were never made aware. More importantly, I want to thank you from all of the people that we represented, that being the good citizens of the state of Indiana, who have benefited from your dedication and expertise over all of these years. I thank you for the lawyers, and I thank you for our clients. It is my pleasure to present to you from the Indiana State Bar Association a print of the Court of Appeals courtroom. I'm not sure you're going to want to stare at this in your retirement all of those days, but you can either do this with it or you can do this. It's just a token, as they say, of our esteem and all of the wonderful work that you've done. Thank you so much for what you've done for all of us.
You haven't had an opportunity to look at the courtroom from that angle, I suspect. I'll now call upon Mr. Kevin P. McGough, President of the Indianapolis Bar Association. Mr. McGough.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Judge Sullivan. The book on Judge Sullivan at the Indianapolis Bar Association is that he was always a willing volunteer who would not say no to a request for help. In other words, Judge Sullivan was one of those go-to guys that makes an organization that's comprised of volunteers work. Rosie Felton was the previous executive director of our organization, and Rosie told Julie Armstrong, who's the present executive director, that Judge Sullivan was her favorite judge. Now, the fact that Rosie shared this privately with Julie, her thoughts on what she felt about Judge Sullivan, says volumes about the sincerity of the high opinion that Rosie had of the judge. The IBA is fortunate to enjoy a very good relationship with the Indiana Court of Appeals in what I call the modern era, that being the Rosie Felton, Julie Armstrong forward era, as opposed to the President Benjamin Harrison and the founding fathers era. And in this era, that's marked by Rosie's reign, the judge was instrumental in helping form what is now this long-standing and fine relationship between our association and the court. I believe that he certainly showed the route from the court to the bar offices to his colleagues. And as I look around the room today and see many friends of the Indianapolis Bar Association who are on the Court of Appeals, not just as members, but as leaders in the organization, we appreciate Justice Sullivan paving that path for us. No doubt that that leadership quality was in Rosie's mind when she said that Judge Sullivan was her favorite. The name is Patrick Sullivan. I could not help but pull out the family book of Irish blessings that the occasion. And if I may the lilt of Irish laughter lighten every note. May the mist of Irish magic shorten every road. May you taste the sweetest pleasures that fortune e'er bestowed, and may all your friends remember all the favors you are owed. On behalf of the Bar Association, we remember you, Judge. We thank you very much for making the IBA the institution that it is today. Your contributions are not forgotten. Thank you. I have something for you, and actually a friend and colleague has come from California to help. Glenn Craney is a former law clerk of the judge, and on behalf of the Indianapolis Bar Association, Glenn and I would like to make a presentation to you.
Thank you, Kevin. Those of us who have worked with the judge or know him well know of his great love of sports, particularly baseball. Back in the 80s, the lawyers of this city went crazy for softball. And the judge, of course, was right in the middle of it. He was a great legend of Lawyers League softball. It came at some point up to about 25 teams that would descend on Riverside Park every Thursday. Had to be an umpire's nightmare. Time does not allow me today to go through all the judge's exploits, but suffice it to say that he was a legend both as a player and a manager. And Kevin has allowed me the great honor today to announce that the judge has been named today the first inductee into the Bar Association Softball Hall of Fame. The plaque that will go to Cooperstown reads, "The spiritual godfather of Lawyers League softball, his unflagging support, infectious enthusiasm, and zealous play were admired and cherished by all." Judge, I don't know of a higher honor or one more deserving.
What do you think of that, Barney?
I don't know what Barney said, but he's probably overruled. Here to speak on behalf of all of the Indiana trial judges, it's my pleasure to call upon the President of the Indiana Judges Association, the Honorable Thomas Feltz, Judge of the Allen Circuit Court. Judge Feltz.
Thank you, Judge Baker. Judge Sullivan, I was doing some channel surfing the other night and came across one of the shopping channels. You know, they're having their Christmas in July. I was thinking for today, with all the gifts that you are receiving, that this might be Christmas in July for you. But on behalf of your fellow judges, your colleagues in the Judges Association, we are the ones that really should thank you for all the gifts that you've given us. Your gifts of wisdom, counsel, gifts of friendship, and camaraderie. And I'm sure that many judges have already sent you letters of appreciation, and you'll be getting some from folks here today as well. And to help you keep good track of those, it's my pleasure on behalf of the Judges Association to present you with this gift memory box, which bears an inscription which I'd like to read you. Presented to Judge Patrick D. Sullivan in grateful recognition of your many years of outstanding service on the Indiana Court of Appeals, 1969 to 2007, from the Indiana Judges Association. Thank you, Judge Sullivan.
In my original introductions, I had the privilege of briefly identifying our next speaker. There's few things Hoosiers always agree about, but there is one thing that we all agree upon, and that is our respect for and admiration for our senior senator. It's with great honor that I have the privilege of calling before the Indiana Court of Appeals the Honorable Richard Lugar. Sir.
to talk about practical politics. The situation the judge we are to honor today, Patrick, is that we started out as young people who had idealism and who had some degree of ambition, fortunately a good bit of physical vigor, and my first recollections and longest conversations with the judge were in automobile trips when one or the other of us had the honor of addressing a Lincoln Day situation somewhere in Indiana. We conversed as to what in the world we could say to the people that we were about to address, tried to inform each other of any anecdotes, any personalities we might have remembered in the counties. Our memories, being young people, were very short. As a result, we used a lot of imagination. But today I'm sure for both of us, as so many dear friends from that time have been introduced. Marge O'Loughlin, who literally was my running mate as the city clerk candidate when I was mayor. Patrick will recall that when the late Keith Newland introduced Marge and me to the board chairman, there was not overwhelming enthusiasm. I dare say Rex Early, who was probably in the room at that time, will recall, as a matter of fact, shock and awe that such a thing might have occurred to Marion County. But nevertheless, we withstood this initial evaluation and continued to convince and to travel back and forth. Pat had a break suddenly with the constitutional change, as Baker's mentioned, in 1970. He used to get elected the old-fashioned way. Election, Republicans, Democrats, this sort of thing. But then it became retention. And I noticed after that first retention vote in 72, as I recall, he had a huge percentage in his favor. It occurred to me that it might be a good idea to get on the ballot at the same time. So I contrived to do that in my first re-election campaign for the Senate in 1982. That was a strenuous year for the Republican Party generally. Our dear President Reagan, had swept in a great number of folk in 1980, but then recession hit, crime rate was 17%, unemployment throughout Indiana, very, very dreadful. So as a result, as I say, a strenuous election, a fairly close one, all things considered. I think Patrick understood that and thus evaded being on the ballot ever again with me. His subsequent retentions came in 92 and 2002, dates that conveniently never juxtaposed with 6-year Senate terms. The 10-year situation seemed to keep missing all the way around. I kept looking for him. I knew that he was out there somewhere, and as a matter of fact, he was usually in his study as a student of the law, as somebody throughout this period of time who learned a great deal about our state, about the human beings and their problems that populate this state and others who come inroads upon us. And it was this sense of scholarship, sense of vigor for the law, which was impressive to Hoosiers as well as his fellow jurists. It is tremendously exciting to have what I believe is today a genuine family reunion. I salute you, Patrick, and finally, let me say that everyone else has been giving gifts to Patrick. But to my great delight, he has found a picture that I have looked for a long time, and he has given it to me and framed it. You will not be able to see it from all of your vantage points, but it looks strangely like a young Patrick Sullivan swearing a young Dick Lugar into office. Patrick, I'm going to keep this as documentary proof that it actually happened.
Thank you, sir.
May I just say that I am honored beyond words. When my children came upstairs before we all came down here, I said, Senator Lugar is going to be here. And one of my daughters says, we've heard that rumor. When's the last time you saw him? I said, 9 o'clock last night on C-SPAN. He was voting on the floor of the United States Senate at 9 o'clock last night. And he got here today. I can't thank you enough.
The next person who I will call upon to make a comment is no stranger to our court. She served for 14 years in the Hamilton Superior Court, for 14 years with the Indiana Court of Appeals, and thereafter for 14 years as a federal magistrate judge, the United States District Court for the Southern District of Indiana. It's hard to imagine that she would come to address the court, but the team of wild horses couldn't keep her away when she has an opportunity to speak about her friend, Patrick Sullivan. Please welcome V. Sushil.
Judges and members of the bar, distinguished guests, friends and family of Pat. I have waited for many years for the opportunity to talk to Pat when he couldn't talk back to me. So if you will forgive me, I'm going to have a conversation with Pat. It's not personal or private, so you're welcome to listen in. Pat, I don't remember when we actually first met. But I think it was probably at Ed Steer's Christmas party in December of 1962 when he invited all the present Deputy Attorney Generals and you were a reformer. And I suspect that's where we met. And for the next several years, you know, our acquaintanceship was rather casual. We'd see each other maybe on the street. It would be, how are you? Is everything going okay? Yeah. How's Ed? Oh, he's fine. He's working me to death. You know, just those kind of conversations. And then I think starting in 1965, we were both judges together, and I would have the opportunity to meet you on at judges' meetings, association meetings. And there I had the chance to get to know you a lot better, because I would have always had lots of questions, lots of problems, and there was always one person that I knew I could go to and get help. Sometimes it wasn't such good help, but at least you were willing to listen, you know, and you'd give me guidance, and it was a very important thing to me as a young judge who really didn't know what was going on so well. And at that time, I learned that you were intelligent, articulate. You had a lot of empathy.
Say that again.
Well, and you were also, I also learned you were just a little bit weird. But little did I know how well those attributes were developed in you. So then came the fateful day when I started working with you on a daily basis. And that was the beginning, at least from my viewpoint, of a very special relationship between us, which I treasure then and I treasure now. Pat, you care about what you do as much as anybody I know. This is ridiculous. Anyway, but he does. You care about the litigants, although you never see them. You only know them through the briefs or through the legal pleadings. But you care about them. You never lost sight of the fact, whatever you were doing, that you were dealing with real people, with real problems that had to be resolved. But as much as you empathize with the litigants and their problems, you never let that empathy cloud or impair your real passion, and that passion is the law. Because, Pat, more than anything else, You care about the law, where it's been, where it is, and critically, where it is going. And grieve as you might over the effects of one of your particular decisions on the litigants involved, your integrity and your trust in the law would not let you compromise the law in order to reach a particular result. Whatever the emotional or indeed the political, and that's what the small p, result or impact it might have upon you, you always did. You called it the way you see them. Indeed, the only time that I can remember I ever questioned your judgment was when you didn't agree with me, you dissented, or you forced me to dissent to one of your opinions. Then I questioned your judgment. I do admit that you were willing to admit a mistake. I treasure one day in the parking lot of Harbor Trees Golf Course when we were playing, getting up there to play golf. And you came over to me, and it relates to an opinion involving a well-known ex-fighter. And you came up to me and said, Sue, can I change my vote? This was after a little ear-chewing event, if you recall. Do you recall that day? You said you were wrong. Well, you said you
You know, I thought I was wrong once, but it turned out I was wrong.
Well, let me just... He always did get the last word. I know you took a lot of grief, maybe some criticism, Pat. None of it deserved because of your thoroughness. But, Pat, you were certainly my conscience. What I remember most, and will always remember, is that you made me a much better appellate judge than I ever would have been without you. You read every opinion that was given to you for your vote, not just the opinion, but you checked the sites, and God forbid, sometimes you even read the cases. And you had this wonderful instinct of when, I think I better check the transcript. You never overlooked anything. You simply would not tolerate shortcuts by anyone or careless work by anyone, and certainly not yourself. Quality is your mantra, and for that you will forever be revered. You were and are a great teacher. A roll call of your clerks would reveal a legion of outstanding men and women whose introduction in the law was under your guidance and in whom you instilled your respect for the rule of law. Many of them are here today to evidence their respect, admiration, and love you. Your great friend, although it's hard to be your friend. You obviously don't have a telephone. You've never eaten lunch. And as far as I can say, you have never dropped by a single person's house to say hi. Nevertheless, there are many of us who are your steadfast friends, despite all your idiosyncrasies. Try as you might to be the consummate curmudgeon. The fact is that you are a very lovable and loved curmudgeon. Thanks.
Now my privilege to call upon a friend of Patrick's and a friend of all lawyers in Indiana, and especially Central Indiana, Mr. John D. Prophet.
Thank you for getting dressed up today, John.
I'll tell you about that. Judy said to me, she said, how many think will be there? I said, I can get 10 or 15 there. When I saw these people, I thought, there must be another event. But then I saw Senator Lugar, and I don't know what the quid pro quo was, but now I understand why all the people. I'm going to steal a little bit of thunder from Pat for a second, because I want to recognize somebody, and I want her to stand, who I think Pat's office would have been a disaster without her. She's been his gatekeeper, if not his guardian, and Betty, I think you should stand. Yes.
judge and a colleague. I know him as a friend of many years standing. For more years than I could count, we played tennis once a week. We played golf 2 or 3 times a week. We took numerous golf trips together, sat next to each other for years at the Colts games, went to many Indianapolis 500s. I don't know, it's baseball games. As a judge, your opinions are always clear, precise, and thoughtful, if sometimes illogical. And we've had discussions about those on several occasions. As his friend, I have noticed with equal measure of interest and alarm some of Pat's traits. Pat likes to think of himself as a person of taste, a gourmet, if you will. And I ask you, what kind of gourmet puts popcorn on chocolate ice cream? What kind of a cook can't make popcorn? We're in a golf outing, and he's got a bag of popcorn, and all you do is put it in the microwave and take it out. You know, he sets fire to it. It's 2 hours before we can get back in the condo. The odor was terrible. Some of you think of Pat as a person with poise and even temperament. Our local golf pro, when I told him prior to coming
My name is on it.
We were playing golf in Florida once, and Pat was having the round of his life, and he was about to take all my money and my partner's money. And we were on the 16th hole, and I said, drive me up to Pat's car. So he did. And I said, Pat, I said, you know, if you could just par in, this would be the round of your life. He immediately put 2 balls in the water, took an 8 and a 9, and lost every bet. Pat is a person with clear priorities. There have been occasions when he's called me about clerks that he thought I might know because they were from our county. And his question was always the same. It was never, you know, whether you're right, smart. He says, I can figure those things out for myself. Does he talk sports? Is he interested in sports? Does he like politics? Is he interested in world affairs? Is it going to be fun for me to talk to? That is a person who's been described here as kind of a champion of the meek, mild, and peaceful, such as his report of Alan Dershowitz and Mike Tyson. Some of you may think he has a neat, orderly mind, and if you believe that, you've never been in his office or his garage. He has enough books, newspapers, baseball scorecards, golf scorecards for 40 years to keep him busy for the next 30 years. Just catalog. In a serious vein, Pat has had a happy love affair with the law. Happy for him, happy for the practice of the bar, happy for the state of Indiana. He has been a credit to our profession. He is a true lawyer in the finest sense of the word, and I consider it my genuine good fortune to be his friend.
To speak on behalf of all of the people that had the good fortune to serve as law clerks for Judge Sullivan, I would now call upon local attorney, Mr. Jerry Garau, who served in Pat's chambers in 1986 and 87, I believe. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Judge Baker. It's an honor to have been asked to speak today on behalf of Judge Sullivan's clerks. This is an honor 21 years ago to have been asked by Judge Sullivan to serve as one of his clerks. that time, Judge Sullivan was still a little wet behind the ears. He'd only been on the bench for 17 years. It's nice to see that with a little more seasoning, they were developed into the type of jurors that would warrant such a distinguished turnout today. The year I spent clerking for Judge Sullivan was the most educational, entertaining, and enjoyable year of my career. Please understand that I mean that comment as a tribute to Judge Sullivan rather than some sad commentary on my career. My introduction to Judge Sullivan came during the interview for the position. I'd been going through all of the cattle call interviews with the law firms where you sit and try to say where you're going to be in 5 years, what you like about the law, and try to figure out whose eyes are glazing over first, scores of the interviewers. Then I had Judge Sullivan's interview, and his interview was decidedly different. Different because, unbeknownst to me, I had a silver bullet on my resume. Instead of spending my law school years clerking for various firms, I had spent my law school career working as a sports writer at Star. So instead of talking about Warren Berger and the rule against perpetuities, we were talking about Steve Stepanovich and the designated hitter rule. 45 minutes of the interview, and I remember walking out of the interview thinking to myself, well, I don't know if I got the job, but I'd like to have a beer and catch a game with that guy. Fortunately, though, I did get the job, and during the year I spent clerking for the judge, I was able to get to know him and get to see what a very special and wonderful person he is. He has a gift for making people feel at ease, and that is a gift that when you're an appellate court judge, I think is just a tremendous gift to have, because law clerks, I assume most law clerks feel like I felt fresh out of law school. You walk into this building for the first day of your job, and you're clueless, you're intimidated, you have no idea what you got yourself in. And from day one, Judge Sullivan was able to instill a feeling of comfort, confidence in his law clerks. He was unfailingly generous with praise, and slow to criticize, and in fact, I don't think he really ever criticized. If you had some issues with your work, he would be able to tell you about it in a way that made you feel, well, maybe I'm not an idiot. Maybe I just didn't see that quite the way I should. Let me tell you, that was something that was invaluable. It was also a treat to watch the judge interact with other members of the court. Judge Gerard's office was catty corner from our office. He would always come in. That was back in the day when Judge Gerard, I think, was spending a lot of nights, spending the night, actually, in his chambers. So he'd stroll over in the morning with a little bit of bedhead. Judge Sullivan. But I especially remember Judge Shields' visits. Judge Shields, unlike Judge Sullivan, tended to hire the worker drone clerks. Her clerks were always boom, hard at it. So Judge Shields would leave her worker drone clerks grinding away and stroll over to Judge Sullivan's office 2 or 3 times a day to bring everything to a complete halt. They would talk and talk and talk, sometimes even about cases. It was always a pleasure. Judge Shields mentioned a little bit how they occasionally had disagreements about cases. But the great thing that I witnessed and that I tried to learn from in watching those disagreements is that they were simply disagreements about cases. It didn't become personal, and when there were dissents written, the dissents didn't have a trace of scorn or invective in them. They were respectful disagreements that meant nothing with respect to the relationship between the two professionals doing their job and doing it very well. And that's something I tried to learn from and tried to take with me. The judge was also an amazing listener. He would listen to your opinions about cases. He would keep an open mind. But it was more fun to have a judge listen to a story. The judge would sit back. He would smile and twinkle in his eye. If people really enjoyed the story, you'd always hear him say, marvelous, marvelous story. I heard that from the judge more than I'd ever heard it from anyone else. I had the pleasure of also getting to know the judge a little bit outside the work setting with the slow pokers, softball team. The slow pokers they consisted of the judge, who was the de facto manager, leader, some folks like Steady Eddie Delaney, who I see here today, of course Judge Barney, Buddy Yosha, a bunch of Pat Bennett, I saw Pat out there, and then there would always be some, the judge would bring along his clerks, and Buddy Yosha would always bring along some of his law clerks. Buddy's law clerks all had three things in common. They could hit the ball a ton, they could run like the wind, and they had never seen the inside of a law school. On the softball field, the things I said a little bit ago about slow to criticize, quick to praise, on the softball field, not so much. The judge was a competitive individual, and it was nice, though, to see, despite how intense he would get about the games, he could always manage to laugh at himself. The things that Judge Barney said about Judge Sullivan were hilarious, and the form of the proceedings prevents me from repeating them here, but he would always take those things with a good-natured grin and totally enjoy it. I'd like to tell you one last story in closing. A couple of years after I finished up my clerkship, I got engaged, and a great tradition, a couple of my buddies threw me a bachelor party. It was at a house down on White River. And I showed up at the party after it had already been in the swing for a while. And there, my buddy Jimmy, who was throwing the party, had gotten a big old bucket that I think had been used for bait or something before, rinsed it out and made a big thing of margaritas in it. And, I walk in, and there with my reprobate old high school buddies, my reprobate college buddies, my reprobate star sports buddies, was the Honorable Patrick D. Sullivan holding a glass of bait/margarita, saying, "Marvelous party." The judge left that party before anything occurred that would have cut his tenure short from 19 years to 38 years. But when I was asked to speak today, I thought back to that party, and I thought that in speaking here, I really needed to raise an imaginary glass and steal the judge's words. Marvelous career, Judge Sullivan. Marvelous.
It's my privilege next to call upon our former Chief Judge and our colleague, Judge James S. Kirsch, Minneapolis.
Chief Judge Baker, Judge Shepard, Judge Sullivan, Lugar, and Garau. I've had the inestimable good fortune of having as a friend a man who has a gentle wisdom and a patient word. These words are humble, but the sentiment is from my heart, and I know the hearts of so many people here today. Like a character in the old novel, we too had the inestimable good fortune of having as a friend, mentor, colleague, and judge, a man possessed of a gentle wisdom and a patient fortitude. I think today, not as past retirement ceremony, but as a celebration of his first 38 years on the Court of Appeals, because we will continue to have him as one of our number as a senior judge. That said, how do we sum up 38 years in a few minutes? And the answer is we can only talk briefly about our inestimable good fortune. 38 years is an incredible length of time. And Pat has asked me to dispel a couple rumors. First, none of Pat's opinions are to be found in Blackford's reports. No, it's not because Pat wasn't around them, but because he was still rewriting them when Isaac Second, there is no truth to the rumor whatsoever that Pat used to ride in horseback to the State House every morning with Governor Oliver T. Morton. No, again, it's not because Pat wasn't around then, but because Governor Morton left home much earlier in the morning. Finally, although Pat's biographical sketch lists his alma mater as Washington Lee University, Pat was there so long ago that it was still Washington College. The college did not add General Lee's name to its name until after the Civil War, or what some of Pat's colleagues at WNL still refer to as the War in Northern Immigration. What there is truth to is the fact that for 38 years, Pat Sullivan has been the quintessential appellate judge. A dedicated public servant who has at all times has upheld the tremendous trust vested in him. A great appellate judge whose clarity of thought and language has permeated every opinion he has written, and whose commitment to the ideals of our profession has been brought to bear in every case in which he's participated. Judges make decisions that affect people's lives, and the lives of families, businesses, communities, often in profound ways. In 38 years, in the thousands of cases in which he has participated, Pat has always brought the full extent of his considerable intellect, knowledge, and experience to bear on every one of those cases. Pat never gave in to the pressures of mounting caseloads. To Pat, the most important case was the case he was working on at the moment. When that case was done, when he was confident that the parties had had their day in court, had had their case decided according to evidence that was legally gathered and properly admitted and determined according to law, then and only then was it time to go on to the next case. For 38 years, Pat has made those women and men who've had the honor and privilege to serve with him better judges. And he's done so using that gentle wisdom in the most patient of ways. He's challenged our thinking, corrected our syntax, pointed out citation errors, and all the while has been the epitome of collegiality and judicial independence. When he could not convince a colleague of the correctness of his position, Pat would dissent, but always in ways illustrating that reasonable people can disagree without being disagreeable. And in a surprising number of occasions in those 38 years, Pat's dissents later became law. For a new judge, sitting on our panel with Pat on our court is a wonderful learning experience. And I will always remember sending my first draft opinion to Pat for his vote. Now, as a new judge, there's a fair amount of trepidation in circulating the first opinion, and it always goes through a number of rewrites and edits before circulating it to your colleagues. John Marshall probably spent less time on Marbury versus Madison than I spent on my first draft opinion. But I finally got it to the point that I could let go of the draft and send it on its way. Now, with all the hubris of inexperience, if not youth, I fully expected that the draft would come back with the glowing comments of my new colleagues. In phrases like keen insight into issues, brilliant analysis and synthesis, and exceptional articulation actually went through my mind. But instead, a few days later, I got Pat's vote back, concurring in result. On the cover sheet, instead of keen insight, Pat said, "Jim, I'm concerned that we don't sufficiently differentiate." And then he gave me a case citation. He continued, noting not my brilliant analysis and synthesis, but saying, "You may also want to look at," and he gave me 3 more case citations. He then ended up with not exceptional articulation, but see my notes on pages 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. What was really bad was it was only 11 a page. I saw there was no longer any white space on any page. Pat had written on every margin of every page, top, bottom, and both sides. I actually tried for a few years reducing the margins on the draft. So there wasn't enough room for his notes. But that didn't work either. I got back at, notes with the margins still filled in, and at the bottom, see accompanying memo. Now, this is not a complaint, but an acknowledgement and an expression of gratitude. Every one of Pat's suggestions is well taken and is made for better reason and better written opinions. It also made me a better judge. Of course, last week I got a draft back from Pat. On the cover it said, "Jim, I'm concerned that we don't sufficiently differentiate." If you look at it, see my notes on pages 2, 3, 5. That said, there is no higher praise than getting a draft back from Pat that simply says, "I concur." It actually happened to me back in 1995. Pat has never met a case he doesn't like, because every case presents the opportunity to further explore the law, to define it and refine it, to clarify it, to explore a new issue, to nudge the law forward, or to rein it back. Many of the people in this room know that our court has virtually no control over the cases that it hears. There's a due process right to an appeal, and the vast majority of our work comes from appeals from final judgments that come to us as matters of right. The exceptions are permissive interlocutory appeals where a party to a trial court proceeding seeks a review of a preliminary ruling by a trial court that may have a significant effect on the proceedings. In permissive interlocutory appeals, we have the discretion to grant or to deny the appeal. Each week, a revolving motions panel meets to consider requests for interlocutory appeals. Whenever Pat sits on the motions panel, it's like a kid in a toy store. You can actually see his eyes light up when he tells us why we should accept yet another interlocutory appeal. Much has been noted about the fact that for the past few years, Pat has been the only Republican on a court whose other members have been appointed exclusively by Democrat governors. And in truth, neither political allegiance nor political differences have ever been an issue. Although I thought about using this opportunity to chide my friends across the aisle about how much they could benefit from Pat's brand of republicanism. In fairness, I have to note that the chiding should go both ways, because those on my side of the aisle could benefit every bit as much. Pat is the last judge elected to the appellate courts by a partisan election, but neither partisan politics nor political expediency is ever factored into Pat's jurisprudence. As evidence of this point, everyone should hear this story from several years ago when Pat and two of his colleagues held the state auditor in contempt for failing to carry out one of the court's orders, and the auditor actually hid out for several hours in the governor's office to avoid being arrested until the matter could be resolved. Mr. Goode, at least the property tax situation hasn't reached those levels. Pat is a sports nut, a history addict, and a political junkie. And all you have to do is walk into Pat's office to see evidence of each of these levels. Books line the wall with occasional baseball cleats, golf balls, and political memorabilia thrown in. But as Judge Shields mentioned, it's Pat's love of the law that defines him most for his colleagues. Due process, equal protection, unreasonable search and seizure, beyond a reasonable doubt, right to counsel, double jeopardy, civil liberties, rule of law. These are not legal concepts, Pat. They're part of his DNA. Pat's love of the law, that fickle mistress that Shakespeare warned us about long ago, has lasted the entirety of his adult life. And even though he has seen much of his fickleness during those years, Pat's love affair with the law burns with as much passion today as it did those many years ago. Pat, for 38 years, we and all of those who've had the honor to sit next to you before us have had the inestimable good fortune of having as a friend, colleague, and mentor a person possessed of a gentle wisdom, patient fortitude, and much, much more. On behalf of our colleagues and for myself, I thank you for all you've given us and the citizens of this state whom we are honored to serve. I commend the example that you have set on everyone every day of those 38 years. I congratulate you on your first 38 years with us, and I wish you Godspeed in all of them.
At this time, I have the privilege of calling upon to speak on behalf of his family, Judge Sullivan's daughter, Mrs. Kelly Romweber. Kelly?
Dad, I'm not quite sure how long you've waited for retirement. I get confused off those conversations. But for most people, retirement is a time to do all the things you have always wanted to do but never had the time. Well, as everyone here knows, our dad is not like most people. Pretty much dances to his own drummer, and definitely has never followed the norm. Instead of planning to spend the rest of his life doing what he has always wanted to do, he's already done it. He didn't just talk about his dream for his life, he's lived it for the past 38 years and continues to do so today. I'm going to give you a little different perspective on living the life of a child of a judge. Growing up in a family with a judge as your father has its special moments, as well as terrifying moments. As one can imagine, there were definitely some laws we had to live by. I'm not saying we lived by them all, because the Sullivan kids were smart. They had to be smart at an early age. Being a child of a judge, some of us chose to dance to our own drummer, just like Dad. Not exactly like him, but you get the picture. We first figured out that Dad only practiced law. And somehow after that, only practicing became our dad writing his opinions about the law. So in the shadow of our father, we had a few opinions of our own. Our first opinion was that Dad was a hard worker. In order to provide for his family, he wasn't at home as much as he would like to be, and there were certain events that he missed. All of these were monumental and always ended with the words, "Wait until your father gets home." Being of the opinion that he was such a hard worker, we knew we would be in bed by the time he arrived and off to school before he awoke. On occasion, we would hear the garage door slowly open up at 9 p.m., where a welcome sign with the phrase from his favorite TV show was displayed on the wall in front of his parking space. It said, "Here comes the judge." If we happened to still be awake, waiting until our father got home, this was the time to scatter upstairs with those words battering our conscience, "Here comes the judge." We hated that sound, we hated that sign, and found no humor in it whatsoever. We even got a little nervous when we heard it on the TV. Terrifying moment for a child of a judge. Special moments presented themselves on Saturdays. If you remember, Dad was a very hard worker, with a lot on his plate, so he often went to the office on weekends. Sometimes we would be able to go with him and ride the bus for extra excitement. Taking the bus was a lot different in those days. We would enter the enormous structure with the shiny gold dome. We would always run up to Ding Dong, the security guard at the time, I'm sure some of you remember him, who would always have candy. Ding Dong would comment on how we've grown, how neat our new kids were, and told us to come with him, and he would give us some candy, and he would have more surprises when we would leave. Little did he know the little surprises that he left for him in the State House. Sometimes Dad would let us sit in his seat on the bench, and that gavel that you see somewhere, was one of the best things in the courtroom. We would pretend court was in session with words like, "All rise," and all of our favorites, of course, "Order in the court." His office was something to behold. Once you were done playing serious secretary or an important law clerk, you would find your way past thousands of books, files, and papers to discover the hundreds of bags of candy, and I mean hundreds of bags of candy, in his personal kitchen area. We discovered some other things too, but preferred the candy at our young age. The fourth floor was a special place because it was high above everyone and everything. Looking over the balcony was another terrifying moment until one of us, who shall remain nameless, discovered that it's hard to hear a half-eaten Snickers bar hit the second floor from so high above. He shall remain nameless. One of those little surprises Ding Dong never drew attention to. Even though Dad was of the opinion, and still is, that an education is the most important thing in life, each of his children went on to learn in their own unique way, dancing to their own drummer. Some chose college, some had other goals. One of Dad's laws was that nobody was better than anyone else, no matter their upbringing, education, or job. Unless, of course, you were a Notre Dame fan, a Republican, or even better, if you could discuss the book The Conscience of a Conservative by Barry Goldwater, Dad's hero. Some of us are now of the opinion that he is not really a Republican anymore. In his retirement, he plans to write a book titled The Conflicted Conscience of a Former Conservative. We wish him well. The obvious and much shared opinion growing up was that Dad loved sports more than our 7 dogs, 4 cats, 6 gerbils, 8 hamsters, 2 rabbits, and a turtle, to name a few. I don't know why you love sports more than all that. In fact, he loves sports more than just about everything. It was a law in our house to not bother him if he had his earphones on that were as big as truck tires. One of his special gifts for Father's Day. We made fun of him while he listened to the Cincinnati Reds. This is a man who could have a couple of televisions going on at the same time, each with a different sport being broadcast, a radio also playing, probably with a baseball game or maybe the news channel, and on top of that, managed to be reading the newspaper or doing some type of work and somehow retain every single bit of it. Sports was always present in our house, and something was played by everyone. If there was a baseball or softball game, Dad was there and could talk about every single play. In track and field, he knew the times ran and encouraged us to try to top it. All of the events we were involved with, from football to tennis to Indian Guides and Girl Scouts, Dad's law was to never quit. The disappointment would come if you didn't at least try something once, and that set the stage for adulthood. It's a special time when a parent shows up at all your special events, but it's truly remarkable when that parent shows up time and time again, putting his broken heart and deep concern aside in order to provide what is most needed. We're not sure if practicing law or writing an opinion helps in these matters, but we are sure that Dad has always been there for us when we have needed it, from spankings to loans to passing out great advice and wisdom to us all. Sometimes it is not in the form we expect, but he has always provided what was most needed at the time, followed his head instead of his heart, and always has managed to throw in a kind word or two. This amazing man, who we are so very proud to call our father, has taught us all so many valuable lessons throughout the year. No matter the situation, we all hope to have that unconditional love and patience for our children and for one another, as our Father always has and always will have for us. It is often said that behind every successful man is a great woman cleaning up the mess. And that is certainly true in this case. Without Betty Heron, who has been with Dad since 1983, he wouldn't have been able to keep up with his monumental caseload. Not that he was the quickest judge on the court. He wouldn't have been able to move very gently from typewriter to keyboard and then onto the wonders of email and the internet. This wonderful woman did everything in room 420, and then some. Those years must have been very, very, very long. And on behalf of the entire Sullivan family, I want to personally thank her for the dedication, loyalty, and true friendship over the years. I would also like to thank the many law clerks, colleagues, and dear friends throughout the years who have meant so much to my father. So, Dad, congratulations. To misquote a very famous author, H. Allen Smith, on Monday morning, you are no longer dedicated to the proposition that all men are created jerks. Your family is in total awe of your many accomplishments. And even though we have always been very proud of you, and to call you, Judge Patrick D. Sullivan, our father, we have never been prouder than at this moment. Congratulations.
Thank you, Kelly. Some of us are experiencing the wind that's in the room right now. So, it has been the tradition of our court to, upon the retirement of one of our members, to recognize that service by a gift. And we've come upon a gift that we have used many times, and that is a chair which has embossed upon it the seal of our court. And we thought about continuing that tradition with Judge Sullivan, but as has been pointed out, there's no room for it in his condominium or his garage. So in lieu thereof, my colleagues and I have made a contribution to his alma mater, Washington and Lee, and we received a copy of a letter that was sent to him to acknowledge that gift. And I'd like to share a bit of that letter, which is from the Dean and Professor of Law, Rodney Smola. What the Dean said to Judge Sullivan was, and I include, what they, that's our colleagues, most likely don't know is that your record continues the record of distinction you compiled as a student at Washington and Lee University. As an undergraduate, you participated in intramural sports, wrote for the Ring Tum Phi, the student newspaper, and were a dormitory counselor. You also played on the freshman basketball team in 1952 and 53 and on the varsity squad in 1954 and 55. According to the 1954 and 55 prospectus, guard Pat Sullivan was a junior returning to basketball after a year's layoff. He shows plenty of court know-how, but he's one of the squad's smaller men, and this may cut down on his chances for the first line of reserve duty. The 1954 and 55 squad finished with a record of 16 and 13. The year prior, when he was not there, the team was 6 and 17. So by the Dean's calculation, Pat was worth 10 wins. As a law student at Washington and Lee, you participated in the moot court competition and made law review on your way to graduating cum laude in 1958. We are honored that you have represented your alma mater with such dignity and distinction through the years. And we, sir, were similarly honored to make a contribution to your alma mater in recognition of your years of service. Jim has very eloquently touched upon some of the qualities that make you such a good judge and a good friend. And as I said at the outset, this is an opportunity for us to express our gratitude to you for having been our mentor, our teacher, our coach. It is often said that the best sermon is a good example, and you have done a wonderful job in preaching. We celebrate your attributes, your persistence, your persuasiveness, your thoroughness, your sense of humor. You have taken your job very seriously, but you have never allowed us to take ourselves similarly. We also today celebrate the wonderful times that we have shared together. serving on a panel, as my colleagues noted. It's one of the great experiences of being an appellate court judge. Sharing remembrances with you at court retreats, and occasionally playing golf with you. Whenever I have done so, I'm always struck by the fact that after having watched Patrick's game, one has to be compelled to think he must be a great public servant. Last October, I had the privilege of speaking on behalf of our court at the swearing-in ceremony of some new lawyers. And I shared with the audience at that time a tradition that my father had, and that was that when he would sign off to us on a note, he would always write, "Work hard, have fun, love Dad." It was particularly important for me to make that remembrance because one of the admittees that day was my youngest son, Nicholas. And Nicholas's grandfather also would write to him and say the same thing. And in doing that, it caused me to reflect upon that tradition of reminding us to always work hard and to have fun and to love. When I reflect upon Patrick's career and all of the things that have been said here today, I think it can succinctly be said that he has worked hard, he has had fun, and he has loved. On behalf of your colleagues, we appreciate you. And I have the good privilege of introducing to you for his remarks, the Honorable Patrick D. Sullivan.
Thank you. Time is fleeting, but there are some people that I would like to recognize that Judge Baker did not introduce. Glenn Craney, who came from Malibu, California, to bring me my initial Hall of Fame award. I thank you, and I'll see you later. I guess the former mayor of the city of Carmel, Dottie Hancock, good friend of mine. She was supposed to be here. I don't know that she is here. Tom and Mary Ives from Carroll County drove down from the hinterlands. Tom was the county chairman, the district chairman when I first ran for office. And one thing my kids remembered about the political campaign was riding in the parade in Delphi, Indiana, behind the fire truck, and they got to throw candy out of an open convertible. That's Mr. and Mrs. Ives back there. My former law partner, Phil Minton, I tried to reach Don Mosman. Don't know where Don is, if still with us. Dick Johnson has been gone for quite some time, and of course Bob Dalrymple is gone. But Phil, you're still hanging on. You're just too damn mean to quit. President of the Indiana Bar Foundation, Bill Wendling, and a very good friend of mine back from days when we played amateur baseball together, junior baseball together. Then he went to Shortridge, and I went to Cathedral. President, former general manager, chairman of the board of the Indianapolis Indians, Max Schumacher, and his wife Judy. I've been privileged to serve on the Indians board of directors for almost as long as I've been on this court. And I thank you, Max, for allowing me to do that. I would like to introduce my very first secretary, Mossy Ellis. I don't know where she is. There she is, back there. She was the personal secretary for then Attorney General Ed Steers. And when I was going to go on the trial court, I called her and I said, "Do you have anybody name you could give me that I could hire for court reporter secretary when I go on the trial bench?" She said, "Well, what's the matter with me?" Ed Steers had not been reelected as Attorney General back then. Mossy was with me several years, and then she went in the court reporting business. Still doing some of that, I trust, down on the river in Jeffersonville. You've already met Betty Heron, her husband John, who puts up with her more than I have to. My sister, Donna Kensler, from Indianapolis, and her daughter, Karen Lips. Please stand. In order of seniority, my daughter, Maureen Benny, and her daughter, Kelly Finnegan. Kelly just completed her first year in college. Please stand up. They are from Northern Virginia, and Maureen is an independent court reporter for the District of Columbia, Virginia, and Maryland. If she isn't typing, she's on the telephone. My son, Kevin. Kevin is from New York City. Actually, he's from Tuckahoe, New York, but he's from New York City. My eldest son was a pretty good football player and ran pretty good track at Shepard High School. And I probably set the Guinness Book of Records for the longest standing freshman at Indiana University. You've already met my daughter Kelly, and I'd like you to meet her daughter, my granddaughter, Taylor Romweber. Taylor, please stand. Taylor started at Shepard, but then bailed out. She's now a student at Ritter, but loves it more because that's where her friends are, and that's what's important. My son Brian. Brian is here from Colorado Springs, Colorado, and Judge Vedic flew back from Colorado to be here today, and she's leaving right after this to go back to Colorado. And I said, "Good Lord, why would you do that?" She said, "I wouldn't have missed it for the world." Thank you, Nancy. But fellow Coloradans have to stick together. Thank you, Brian, for coming out clear this way. My youngest daughter, Carrie, her husband, Danny, and my granddaughter, Lindsay. They're from Gaithersburg, Maryland, and I don't get to see them as much as I would like to, but I thank you for being here very, very much. Thank you all. I can't say enough, but until they invent a better phrase, thank you will just have to do.
On behalf of Judge Sullivan and my colleagues, I'd like to thank all of you for being here today and participating. I know that this ceremony has been lengthy, but it's hard to compress 42 and over 1/2 years of service. We would also like for you to join us in a little fellowship and refreshment in the foyer outside of the courtroom following these proceedings so that we might meet you and greet you and thank you individually for being here. Mr. Bailiff, you may call the court to order.
Come back and get these later.